Rugby with Huw Griffin.
Welcome back to Megafoon Rugby. Huw Griffin on Rugby is our usual spot where we talk about what happens in Europe and in England to better understand it. And what better time to talk to somebody like you, an expert, than when the Lions team was announced. I hunted you down in Provence in France, and I didn't let you get away because I want to know what's going on this year. But first and foremost, if you're not didn't have too much of a night last night, tell me why the Lions are so important.
There's lots of reasons why the Lions are important. So much of rugby discourse and so much of rugby chat from fans levels sat in pubs, messaging your friends on social media to big in the media is selection debates. And it starts off at your club level and then who should get selected for the international side and then who should get selected to the Lions. It's the ultimate selection debate, which is kind of the easiest kind of debate to have. You know, I've said in the past that selection debate is not analysis, and I stand by that. However, it is the most fun, and there's a lot of content to be gotten out of it. So the problem, probably the reason that it seems so big across socials, across YouTube and things like that, is that it's just such ripe fruit for whether that's YouTubers or whether that's mainstream media to generate debate about it. And you have to remember that unlike they're down in the Southern Hemisphere where you and the All Blacks claim each other's achievements as your own, we hate each other. This is four nations who generally really would rather anybody win but each other, and then they come together. Now you can get misty-eyed and romantic about that, about how these enemies unite for one great thing, but it doesn't really go away. You don't really just start loving a guy just for a few months and then go back to hating him again. If something goes wrong, if someone from another country does something wrong, the ones from the other countries will blame him. And you can tap into that when you create the content about it and have the debates, and you're pitting head to heads. You know, the kind of debates about which player is better was existing anyway, and now it's hyper focused, and you kind of get an almost correct answer if you agree that the Lions head coach's opinion is ultimately the correct one. And there's a sporting eliteness to it because you have to be the best of the best of the best to get into it, theoretically. And it's just such a money spinner. You'd be daft if you look at someone like Squidge Rugby must be well into double figures in the last month about it. And the reason that he does that is to generate income off it. You know, that's his way of making a living. And it's the most guaranteed way of doing that. And the tour itself is a huge money spinner. You know, I've started thinking in the recent weeks, I think the Lions tour is a bigger deal in the Southern Hemisphere, in the countries that host, than it is for the countries who provide the players, because it's such a huge commercial vehicle. So that's just some of the reasons, some of the maybe less romantic reasons as to why it's so special.
I'm sorry, I'm going to get sidetracked a little bit now, but something that jumped out there for me is the fact that you said us here in the Southern Hemisphere claim each other's achievements as our own.
Yeah,
Where did you get that from? I mean, really, are you smoking something?
You absolutely do that. Whenever the All Blacks win, South African fans go, see, Southern Hemisphere, we're better than you. See, we're brother, we're friends, we're on the same team. Whereas in the Northern Hemisphere, when Ireland are playing the All Blacks, we want the All Blacks to win. When England are playing South Africa, Wales fans, Irish fans, Scotland fans, we want South Africa to win. We don't have this kind of hemisphere loyalty that a lot of people in the Southern Hemisphere seem to think that there is some kind of Northern Hemisphere conspiracy. I cannot emphasize enough, guys. We hate each other and we want each other to lose all of the time.
Yeah, I'd beg to differ. I hear what you're saying. Maybe in the Southern, autumn series, if All Blacks play against Ireland, we probably think All Blacks, but I don't think that's the case that much anymore. I mean, we do support the Northern teams. Like I just said, with socials and everything, we get to know these other teams a little bit better. We play in the URC, we play in the Northern Hemisphere. And especially with the comments coming out of New Zealand about the URC being so inferior and everything else, I think there's a case to be made that we are sort of aligning ourselves with the Northern Hemisphere. I mean,
yeah, but that's a dig at you, though, isn't it? That's not a dig at the Irish or the Scottish. That's a dig at the South Africans.
No, I'm just saying, if you say that we, as South Africans, are automatically aligned with the Southern Hemisphere teams, I think that's actually changing. That's what I'm getting at.
When Fiji beat Wales, I saw South African fans saying, "Yeah, Southern Hemisphere, clean sweep. Fiji did it, contributed to that." You're not Fiji's friends. When was the last time South Africa even played
No, I
Fiji?
don't think it was about the fact that it's Fiji. I think it was about the fact that they were the underdogs. We like supporting the underdogs. That's what it's about. So next time Wales plays Fiji, Wales will probably be the underdogs, and we'll support Wales. We like underdogs, man. It's a big thing here. And I told you, Harry sent me a video the other day that's something about a Swedish rule that you have to be, know your place, don't brag about things, don't get a big head and everything else. And it's typical that's how South Africans are. Not all South Africans on X, for that matter, but most South Africans are actually quite normal people. Anyway, let's get back to the Lions. I got a bit sidetracked there. So the next question clearly is, how much do the British and Irish public actually still support and love the Lions? You did a bit of a poll there. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so that was a question that I wanted to ask, because chatting to people kind of in WhatsApp groups and on social media and things, I was getting a sense that not everybody absolutely loves the Lions. It's not everybody's necessarily their favorite thing. And this plays into my theory that it might be a bigger thing in the Southern Hemisphere than it is in the Northern, for the host countries at least. And so I ran a poll. I ran a poll on Twitter and I ran a poll on YouTube, and they came back with very similar numbers. I think it's close to 1,000 people have voted at this point. And I asked the question, I gave 4 options. Do you love the Lions? It's your favorite thing. Do you? It's fun. I enjoy it. Are you not bothered, not really that interested, or do you hate it? So like I said, about 1,000 people have voted, and the biggest, about 50% of people said it's fun. They enjoy it. So not it's the best thing ever. More, yeah, it's while it's on, I enjoy it while it's going on. It's a bit of fun. And then the second most popular answer was not bothered. Now, it was a long way behind it's fun. I think it was about 22% not bothered, and then it was about 21% it's the best thing ever. So it's about level pecking between absolutely love it and neutral at best, which I think is interesting. And then a very, very, very small proportion of people said that they really don't like it. And chatting to people, the reasons that people maybe don't like it is the thing of Britishness, and this is going to get a slightly political here, and I apologise for that. There's an independence movement in Scotland. There's an independence movement in Wales that is less prevalent than it is in Scotland, but it is there. And of course, you get into Irish history, and that's too big to talk about on a particularly a rugby podcast. So the idea of Britishness is not something that all of the constituent nations and all of the fans of those nations are behind. A lot of them are. I should emphasise that there's plenty of people in all of those countries who do see themselves as British. But there's those who do not as well, and those people are in that fan base. And there are some of the comments that I got back were like, if you gave me a choice between my club side winning the URC or getting into the URC playoffs, or the Lions winning the Test series, I pick my club side. And I think there's something to be said about that. Of the Lions is only around once every 4 years, so to get that emotionally invested in a team that's only around once every 4 years, only plays 3 tests, especially if you're going to be someone like Scotland or this year a Wales fan, who you're not going to see many teams and just many players in that team. Yeah, like I got a comment that said, I'll hope that the players from my country do well. I hope that they don't get injured. I'll enjoy it while it's going on. And then I'll be fully focused on when the club season restarts. I'll be fully focused on when the Six Nations restarts. So there's, I think it's a really interesting, almost socio-political thing about, does everybody love the Lions? Like I said, my poll found the vast majority of people enjoy it. And there are plenty of people who think it's the best thing ever. But there is a proportion of British and Irish fans who aren't enamored with it.
Let's talk about the captain first and foremost. Maro Itoje, the sort of common knowledge and open secret that he was going to be the captain. It wasn't to be confirmed, but then Caelan Doros got injured in that game against Northampton Saints. And it sort of became clear. How does that work? He knew before. He was the only player that knew he was going to be on the tour, because I suppose he was contacted the day before and then informed. How does that work?
Yeah, you have to be asked to be the captain. You can't find out on the day. I don't know. I can't imagine a player ever saying no, but it's generally the captain gets rung the day before or a couple of days before and said, "Do you want to be captain?" That's what happened with Alan Wynne-Jones on the last tour. Warren Gatland called him, and then you have to be a part of the kind of reveal event. You have to be on stage and things, so you have to know beforehand. It wasn't a great shock. I think with the Doris injury, it became a contest of one with Itoje. I put out on socials that there's only one player in the whole 15 for the Lions that you write down and don't even think about it for a second, and it's Maro Itoje. So easy, and the English media said that he should have been captain in 2017. He should have been captain again in 2021. So now he's finally captain again in 2025. As a Welsh fan, there's a part of me that's thinking Alan Wynne-Jones started 12 Lions tests in a row, and that was a record. And I would kind of like to see that preserved, because I'm a Wales fan and I want a Welshman to be on top. But you can't say that Maro Itoje hasn't earned it. So you get no complaints from that point of view. And I think, like I said, I don't think there was an outstanding candidate other than him.
On that subject, he only became England captain this year. There was a lot of, sort of uncertainty and doubt about the fact that he could be captain and be a good captain. But he actually stood up and, stepped up to the plate. He's a pretty good captain. And I suppose he, apart from the fact that he plays good rugby, he's got the right personality to be a captain as well.
Yeah, we've only had 5 games, and England won 2 of those very easily against Italy and Wales. They just about scraped against Scotland in a bit of a lucky result. Arguably lucky against France as well, and then lost to Ireland. So there is a case to say that his captaincy is still on probation, shall we say? He's still yet to... How does he handle a referee in a tight game? How does he do this, that, and the other? I've got no worries about him in terms of the media. And I think you have to realise on the Lions tour how much of a big thing that is. Like Sam Walden talks about it on the tour to New Zealand, about you're travelling every day and then you're going and you have like a Maori welcome everywhere that you go, and then a press conference everywhere that you go. You're like a politician almost, and you have to be facing that. And I think that's a big reason why Warren Gatland liked Sam Warburton so much, is because he was very good at that, and he was going to be good with the media. And I think Maro Itoje can do that. I actually think that Maro Itoje is holding back a little bit in terms of, I think he could be a character and an icon in rugby much more than he is at the moment. If you look at things that he's put out here and there and comments that he's made, whether that's to do with politics, to do with equality and things like that. Obviously, his background is quite different to a lot of his peers. So I think he could be more than he is at the moment. I think he's holding back, and whether he's being held back by other people or whether he's made the decision that he doesn't necessarily want to be in the spotlight that much, which is completely up to him, no problem at all. But I think he could be a real icon, bigger than rugby someday.
No, I can see that. I agree with you. On the subject of the team reveal, it was held in the O2 Stadium. You and I are both Formula One fans. They had a very successful show at the beginning of the year at the same O2 Stadium, revealing the cars and the likes. This show was sort of apparently the same, only 2,000 people, but sold out from what I gather, although it was a bit of a stretch there, yeah. What did you think of the actual show?
So it wasn't in the same place. So I can understand why you'd think that, but O2 is just the sponsor. O2's, I'm sorry if I'm patronizing anybody. O2 is a mobile phone company in the UK and Europe. I don't know whether it is down there. And they sponsor a few venues around London. You've got the O2 Arena, which is where the Formula One was, which is the big kind of indoor stadium. And then you've got the O2 Apollo, which is where this was, which is like much more like a theatre. Now, I'm not sure I believe that it was sold out. It was a bit odd. I found it weird that it was on a stage, but they had a sofa and chairs set up. It's kind of, if you're going to do sofa and chairs, just do it in a studio, and then have like a studio audience. I think they got it a bit wrong, to be honest. I don't. From a production point of view, it looked odd. The framing, because they were all sat, and then the Lions logo was up here, and they kind of had to frame it from beneath to film it to get everything in, to get the logo in. It was just a bit off for me. So I would have done it in a studio, and if you could have done it in a TV studio and had an audience there. I thought, because like you, when people were saying to me it's in the O2, I thought it might be in the big stadium, which I thought that would be weird. And then are they going to have like live music like they had in the Formula One? Yeah, I think that it was underwhelming. I think some of our worries about what it might turn out to be like were realized, to be honest.
Well, I'm happy you put me right there, because that's why I'm asking these questions. I live in Pretoria, deep down in dark Africa, so I don't know anything about O2 stadiums. I don't know who O2 is. Now I know. Thank you. So, no offense taken. I like it. Now, tell me about the team as a whole. What generally, what were your impressions? Is it a good team? Is it a balanced team? We'll get into the nitty gritty of it just now, but just your first impressions when you saw that team. What did you think?
Well, first thing I did when the squad was announced was I wrote it down. I did position by position, and we know, of course, here in 2025 that positional versatility is massive. So you have to look at who can cover where. And compared to the first 15 that I picked on a podcast after the Six Nations, the only player who's who's not there is Caelan Doris, who's injured. So in terms of the first 15, it's all there. It's when you start getting to a bit deeper in the squad, so the second and third choices, you start thinking, okay, so the loose head prop, Genge, Porter and Schumann, all there, definitely.
Excuse me, Skuman.
Oh, Schumann,
I taught
sorry.
you this before.
I know you did, I'm sorry. So Genge, Porter and Schumann, all there. Sheehan is there in the hooker. Kelleher and Cowan-Dickey are not two that I had. I had Jamie George and I had Dewi Lake. Now, maybe I was being a little bit Wales biased getting Dewi Lake in there, although I can back it up. I'm not surprised about Kelleher. I am surprised about Cowan-Dickey. Maybe the logic is if Sheehan goes down, do you want Jamie George starting? Because if you're taking Jamie George, you want him off the bench and you want him maybe a midweek player. Do you want Jamie George starting? But then you've got Kelleher there, who maybe you'd start with Sheehan. And then tight head, I'm surprised and not surprised about Furlong, because I don't think his form has been great for 2 years now, and I don't think on merit he's necessarily worked his way in there. However, he obviously has a ton of credit in the bank, and maybe there's some kind of intangibles that he brings that coaches value. And it's interesting because if I skip on down, Elliot Daly has been picked on the last 3 Lions tours, including this one. And a lot of people said that he shouldn't have gone in 2021. He didn't earn that on form. And you can make a very comfortable case that the same is true this time, but 2 different Lions coaches on 2 different courses have picked him anyway. So there's clearly something about Elliot Daly that coaches love. What that is, we don't perhaps know. I'd love to find out. And maybe it's his positional versatility and that he can cover at a push 11 to 15, which helps. Although, in my opinion, another man who can cover 11 to 15 would be Tom Jordan. And I think he's superior to Elliot Daly as we sit here in 2025. That's just my own personal opinion. So that's an interesting one. It might be to do with the fact that he's experienced on a Lions tour. And if I look down that back line, Finn Russell has got Lions test minutes. Duhan van der Merwe, I think, has. Bundiaki has. And then that's it. So maybe he wanted another Lions test, but that logic hasn't applied to other players in other positions. So the Elliot Daly one for me is I can understand it, but I still don't agree type situation. Other than that, the big omission for me is Talupi Faletau. You've only got one specialist 8. I know Ben Earl has played a lot of game time at 8 for England. However, in my opinion, he is first and foremost a 7. And I think not taking Faletau, especially with the injury to Doris, I would have taken him. Now, you can say that's just Wales fan bias. Okay, fine. Maybe I am guilty of that. But for me, Faletau is the big omission. Other than that, not much else I can argue with, to be honest.
Only one player from France who plays his rugby in France. Why not Jack Willis, for example? I mean, that guy's been playing out of his skin. And Larry and I talked about it before. And for us, he was sort of penciled in and not there.
Well, I think as a general rule, if a Lions coach turns around and says you have to be playing test level rugby in order for me to consider you, fine, you can get on board with that. Obviously, Henry Pollock is the one who breaks that rule. Jack Willis is probably going to be in the latter stages of the top 14 playoffs, which will clash with the first 2 games of the Lions tour. So if it comes down to a deal breaker, then there's your answer. It's you're not playing test rugby and you're not going to be available for the first 2 games. And number 7 is such a competitive jersey. And I think this is another massive talking point of this squad, is that he's picked 5 open side flankers. And I'm counting Ben Earl as an open side flanker. In Tom Curry, Ben Earl, Jack Morgan, Henry Pollock and Josh van der Fleer, all have played at 7. In fact, when it comes to who started the most games at number 6, it's Tom Curry with 46 professional games started at number 6. And that's because he plays in a Sale Sharks team with his twin brother, Ben, who's also an open side. And so they've gone for a dual open side kind of approach. So that tells me that dual open side is probably something the Lions are going to go for. The trade-off to that is you are giving up size in that back row, and you are giving up line out, which is a really something that I noticed during the Six Nations, is that Ireland in the line outs heavily favoured throwing to the front, or they would throw completely long over the top and go straight to Bundyaki in the 12 channel and skip the line out almost entirely. So I think that's an area that if I'm Australia, I'm probably looking to target now. Because if you look at the athletes who they can turn to in the line out in terms of the second rows, Tyburn and Ollie Chessum both can play at number 6, which I expect them to do in at least one test. But Tyburn is part of a monster line out that is orders of magnitude shambolic, like the worst line out you've ever seen. Ollie Chessum, I don't know tons about his line out capabilities. I'm sure they're perfectly fine. And then Mara Soje, of course, he's going to be captain. Is he going to be the line out caller as well? And then are they going to heavily favour the front like Ireland do? So if I'm Australia, that's probably an area I'm looking to exploit, is the Lions at line out time.
The one name you mentioned there that everybody's talking about, the one true bolter, that's Pollock. You mentioned the test, but he had, I think, one test.
One test off the bench against Wales.
He played out of his skin again for the Saints against Leinster specifically. Why do you think he was chosen? I mean, he's only 20 years old. He was playing under 20s last year still. So why pick him?
I think there's an argument with the Lions that if they're running hot, you just got to take them. If you look back through the annals of Lions squads, you can sometimes look at the test team and go, "Wow, gee, I can't believe he played for the Lions. Like, what has he done since then?" Players can go on Lions tours and then disappear from the rugby consciousness pretty quickly. So if someone's just running hot and it's just a one-off, you only need to have 6 months of good form. If they're just in such a hot streak of performances, just take them and hope they maintain it. And look, it might be that he gets on tour, plays in some midweek games, and they go, "Oh, okay, he's not up to the level of the more established internationals." It might be that he's amazing. I think it was one of those ones that was worth a wild card because of the form that he's shown. It's interesting how many, when we were talking about who was going to get picked, how many injured players and how many non-international players, such as the France-based players who we mentioned, were being talked about, which tells you that not tons of players are coming into this Lions tour in red-hot form, whereas Henry Pollock is. So I understand, but like I said, I'm repeating myself, 5 open side flankers is interesting to me. That is an interesting tactical choice, and I'm sure Joe Schmidt will be already thinking, getting into his war room and start connecting things on boards and things of how to, because that's Andy Farrell already showing part of his hand there for me.
Just an interesting thing, of course, in South Africa, open side is a 6 and a blind side is a 7.
Yeah.
So sometimes you have to just stop and think about what you're saying now, so I can put it into the right context here. Anyway, the other big
open side flankers.
Yeah. The other big talking point, of course, was at 10 fly-offs. Sam Prendergast being the first choice fly-off for Ireland this entire season, I think, after the last game, and then not going on the tour. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, I spoke to a guy who coaches in Ireland at the end of last year about who he thought might be the 10s. I think we were just talking about the Irish 10s, and he said that he didn't think that Andy Farrell would take either of them. I don't think it's any great shock that he's obviously not taken Jack Crowley. And I think Sam Prendergast, you couldn't really argue that on form and performances, Sam Prendergast should have gone. I think for me, Marcus Smith is an interesting one, because I clearly Finn Smith has taken his jersey for England, and I don't think there's any kind of looking back. I think Finn Smith is clearly getting the better out of England at 10 than Marcus Smith ever did. I'm interested to know if they see Marcus Smith as a fullback at test level. For me, no, not. He's good in attack, and England came up with good ways to use him in attack that made the most of his strengths that he absolutely has. Ball in hand, high ball, no. Defence, no. So is he just a midweek fullback? Yeah, I'm not sure, because I just don't think he suits kind of the Irish way. The vast majority of the coaching ticket is Irish. The vast majority of the squad is Irish. I don't see how Marcus Smith works in an Irish team. And I've always had this thing about if you're going to have Marcus Smith on the bench, because if you go back to the old logic, you have a controller to start and then you have a maverick on the bench if you're chasing the game. To me, I've always thought that was just planning for failure. If you have your most mercurial player on the bench, that tells me that you're expecting to be losing. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, that one is probably another one for me. But then you look around and say, well, who would you take instead? So you're probably not taking a 10 from Wales. If he's not taking Sam Prendergast and he's not taking Owen Farrell, who on merits and performances on the pitch doesn't deserve to go on the Lions tour, it would only be purely on intangibles if you took Owen Farrell. Maybe that's the case of there wasn't anybody else.
Okay, now looking at the players who've been picked to go fly off, and then you take into account Johnny Sexton being there as a coach for some reason. What does that mean? Why is he there, number one, and how does he fit in with those players that have been selected?
Why is he there? This is his first official coaching gig. He was in and around the Ireland camp in the Six Nations, I believe. Ever since Johnny Sexton retired, the narrative in and around Ireland has been, well, it's not the same since Johnny left. And all of the stories that you hear from players who played with Johnny Sexton talk about how much he drives the standards, how much he demands of other players and things. So is it just a case of having him in the environment, having contributed to the environment, a guy who's been there, done that on two Lions tours to Australia and New Zealand, and just have him being an extra voice that you need there? He's going to be a clash of personalities with Finn Russell for sure. So yeah, it's a contentious one. Certainly when it was announced, a lot of Irish social media wasn't impressed by him being there. I can't say that I've got particularly strong feelings about it.
But I mean, in terms of the players that he's going to have to coach as fly-off, I mean, like you said, Finn Russell is going to be a problem personality-wise, but style-wise and the likes, what does Johnny bring to the party that someone else wouldn't?
I don't think Johnny Sexton was ever seen as a flair 10. If you look at you had the trifecta, what I referred to as rugby's Nadal, Djokovic and Federer, between him, Owen Farrell and Dan Biggar. He's abrasive. He's the boss on the field. When Johnny Sexton's on the field, you're under no illusions as to who is driving the bus, as Andre Pretorius would say. So that's kind of his thing. In terms of coaching, is he going to be tactical? Is he purely going to be a kicking coach? We don't really know, is the answer.
Right. Now, the next question sort of ties into that. You've got 4 countries being represented in this team. You've got lots of different personalities. You just mentioned Finn Russell and Johnny Sexton, for example. How do they get this team to gel with each other? How do they get that common spirit that once you pull that red jersey over your head, that you now become a Lion and you're no longer an England or Ireland player or whatever? So what's the next step? How do they, do they have camps, or how does it work from now on?
Yeah, there will be once the club season is over, the players will get brought in, and there will be a bonding session. But I think in the past that has been something like they do, like if you've ever been on one of these like management team building courses, they build a raft or something, and all fall in the water. And other times they just have beers. And Sam Wolverton talked about on his last Lions tour, in his experience, just going and having some beers is probably the best way of doing it. He and I think there's an expectation, these are all grown men, apart from Henry Pollock, obviously. And they, so there's an expectation that you're a Lions now. So there's a level of what is expected of you. Having some guys in there who've been there and done that a couple of times, they know what the gig is. And there will be an expectation of you have to leave your rivalries at the door. And I've heard like old Lions talking about the fact that you share your line out calls, stuff that you would guard with your life. You'd give away the family silver before you tell them your line out calls, and then you're there on a Lions tour telling them what your line out calls are. How national coaches feel about that, I don't know. If you have to go back to them or text your international coach like, I've just told Mario Toje all of the Ireland's line out calls, we're going to have to come up with new calls. I don't know how that works, but there's an expectation there. There will be some bonding, but if students of Ben Darwin, the cohesion is a big thing for the Lions, and it's a massive challenge that they have to overcome. And that's why you probably will see, if not the Irish spine, then there will be a level of pods there. Warren Gatland, I think in 2017, picked the Saracens line-out pod to be in there and to just run the line out. And whether that be in the centres, you could do the same thing with the Glasgow centres or what have you. The cohesion factor is a massive thing that needs to be overcome, and that's why as well on Lions tours you tend to see, we talk about midweek teams, of the team that's probably going to be the test team plays on the weekends, and then you got the guys on the fringes playing in midweek to build up that cohesion. But it's definitely the number one challenge of the Lions is getting these enemies to become brothers.
Yeah, it's always, you just mentioned right at the beginning of this conversation that how much we hate each other. And now you have to play together. Yeah, that's always interesting to me. I'm trying to visualize in my head if we had to do like a Southern Hemisphere Lions team, call it that. We talked about it earlier, the Pangolins or something. How would that work? South Africa and All Blacks and Wallabies and maybe Fijians and some Samoans in the same team. I suspect, to your point earlier, that we might gel easier than you guys would. And that's quite an interesting conundrum, don't you think?
I think I can see that. And oh God, I'd love to see a combined Pacific Island team. I would absolutely love that. They would play unbelievable. Some of the, like, try picking, if you get a spare 10 minutes, try picking a Pacific Island team. You'll realize how difficult it is and the unbelievable players that you've got to choose from. That's a great one. But one thing that I will say is, if there was a combined kind of rugby championship team, the Lions is named after an African animal. We don't have lions in the UK, so you have to name it after a British animal. So you'd have to be called the Badgers.
I actually like the badgers because it's sort of a tough animal. Even a lion shies away from a badger in nature. So on the rugby field, clearly that would follow as well. That's a good name. I like it. Just lastly, or almost lastly, only 38 positions announced. Apparently, there's two still left up for grabs. Why would that be, and who do you think is going to fit in there?
I don't know. That was a surprise. The name that everyone's talking about is Owen Farrell. I believe the wording was used: prove form and fitness. So that would tell me it's someone who he wanted to take, but he doesn't feel like he can justify taking it. So it's probably someone who's currently injured. Now, there are players who are currently injured that he has picked. And then prove form. I don't know who that's referring to. Everyone's saying, oh, does that revert to Owen Farrell? I don't know. I honestly don't know. If I look down the list, the position that jumps out of not having maybe enough bodies there is number 8. So maybe that's leaving the door open for Doris to come back. We still don't really know the full extent of Doris's injury, all that I've seen. Again, I think Faletau should have been there. And is there another winger maybe that they're bringing in? Because I'm looking down and he's got at least 3 options in every jersey. So that's a bit of a mystery to me.
I don't want to use the word nepotism, but sort of what I'm referring to, firstly for NFL, regarding Owen, but also regarding Ireland. And I mean, in the sense that, is this team balanced enough, do you think? Is it not too Irish or too little Irish or too English or whatever? What's the country balance? Only 2 Welsh players and 10 in the previous tour. I mean, it's understandable in terms of what the form is at the moment. What do you feel about that balance, the country balance?
I'm not surprised of the Irish dominance. 12 players from Leinster alone is amazing. But I think that says a lot about, if I give an aside here, that says a lot about Irish rugby, because 12 players from Leinster, and if you look at the players not from Leinster picked, Tadhg Beirne, who is a Leinster Academy graduate, went to the Scarlets and then was signed by Munster. So he's from Munster, but his origins are not from Munster. And then the 2 guys from Connacht, Bundy Aki and Mac Hansen, I can show you photos of those guys wearing Super Rugby jerseys from 10 years ago. So that's a bit of a story about the state of play in Irish rugby at the moment. But I'm not surprised. And again, it comes back to the cohesion factor. And you look at the coaches as well. A lot of Irish coaches on that ticket, so they're picking players they know. The Lions is a race. Lions tours aren't long. You haven't got much preparation time. So it's a shortcut of a way to do that. And, for all the difficulties that Ireland have had, still not a bad team. They're still probably the 4th best team in the world. So I don't think it's maybe even the 3rd best. I don't think it's. I don't quibble with it too much. Speaking about that, then I've just realised as well that Mac Hansen, that's another player who, and if I was talked about form and fitness for those 2 extra spots, Mac Hansen currently not fit, currently not in form, picked on the Lions tour. That's another one who I think I would have picked. Again, maybe
Darcy
Blair Murray. Darcy Graham. Yeah, Darcy Graham is another one who probably on that right wing has clearly had a better season than Mac Hansen. Is not up for debate.
Is he? But he had a big injury, didn't he? Concussion, but he should be fine by now, I'm sure.
He's back now. He's already back for Edinburgh.
Okay, all right. All right, I'm going to put the link up to the 8-pound combo that you were a guest on this week. And I'm putting it up there for the specific reason that after you were on that show, Harry ended up in hospital. So this is sort of my insurance to make sure that I don't end up in hospital either. You said you were only one of the 100 men. I love that comment. It was so funny. So hopefully I'll be around next week to talk to you again. Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Rugby with Huw Griffin.